Hello. Um, I'm going to make another artist video. I'm going to do one on an artist who is very well respected amongst a lot of musicians, but has sort of been forgotten, I guess is more the better word, by a lot of contemporary people, um, despite him being one of the great songwriters of his generation. Um, Harry Nilsson is the artist I'm going to cover. Harry was um, won several. He won 2 Grammys, had a #1 single, several other top 40 hits, a couple of which have recently gotten attention. I remember "Gotta Get Up" off his classic Nielsen Schmielsen album was featured in Russian Doll about 2 years ago now, a year ago maybe, on Netflix, and his big #1 "Without You" is one of the most covered songs ever, and was in Super Bowl commercial a couple years ago, and "Coconut" you hear all the time. So it's not like he hasn't been referenced, but he kind of gets not as much as I feel he should be, and his Twitter account is constantly petitioning for him to be up for the Hall of Fame, which he has not been nominated for, which is a travesty for those who know about him. Harry Nilsson, born in 1941, was discovered while working at a bank. I believe he was talking, he met a guy who worked in a publishing company. He said, "Oh, I write songs," and he sat and played him some songs, and they were sort of very, very impressed by him. And he ended up eventually his big break was working with Phil Spector. He wrote a couple of songs, one of which was done by the Ronettes, called I think Paradise. One of the late mid '60s Ronette songs. In 1967, he was signed to RCA Records and made his first album, Pandemonium Shadow Show, and has some of his early classics like 1941, Cuddly Toy, which was covered by the Monkees, which he did. They did a couple of his songs on the show. Has some very cool Beatles covers on this record. She's Leaving Home, which is from Sgt. Pepper, which had just come out earlier that year, so it's kind of impressive that it was on that. And 1941, Without Her, it's very much of the time period in terms of the sound, but it's an excellent record and is, you hear Harry's amazing singing voice on full display on this record. In 1968, he came out with Aerial Ballet, which is one of his more accomplished records, and has his song Everybody's Talking, which became a massive hit about a year after this. This was the one cover on the album, which is the unfortunate joke in Harry's catalog, is that he was an amazing songwriter and yet was more known for his covers. Everybody's Talking and Without You were both written by other people and were his 2 biggest hits, and the 2 he won his Grammys for. This one also has Daddy's song, Good Old Desk, Mr. Richland's favorite song, Don't Leave Me, Together, One, which was later covered by Three Dog Night, and they had a massive #1 single with it. I believe it was #1. Are all on this record. It's one of his more consistent records as in terms of him writing most of the material on the record. In 1969, he dropped his producer, Rick Gerard, and arranger, and made Harry on his own, produced it himself. This record has the Puppy song, which was also covered by the Monkees, um, and good cover of Mother Nature's Son from the Beatles' White Album. This also has I Guess the Lord Must Be in New York City. I Guess the Lord Must Be in New York City was written by him for the movie Midnight Cowboy. Midnight Cowboy ended up winning Best Picture in 1969, became the first X-rated film to win Best Picture. Harry's song featured in it was his cover of Everybody's Talking. Apparently, the story was that they had gone to a couple of different people, including him. They had used Everybody's Talking as sort of the filler song while they were editing it together, just to sort of, it was sort of just said filler, generally what they were sort of thinking of. They went to several people, apparently Lay Lady Lay from Bob Dylan and this song were written as possible, filler for, to be the real song for the film. And then they ended up just deciding to keep it, and said it ended up went to number 6 on the charts and won him a Grammy for Best Vocal Performance. Oh, and it also has his cover of Simon Smith and His Amazing Dancing Bear from Randy Newman. Harry and Randy did a couple of things together, including Harry's next album, Nilsson Sings Newman. This is has this cover especially has been used by several people over the years. They parodied this cover several times. This has him doing several of his favorite Randy Newman songs, with Randy playing piano on it. It's a very interesting record. It has some great versions of some of these songs. All during this point, Harry was sort of building a reputation. Wasn't really, he was just starting to sort of break with the big hit, and had other people covering his songs and having big hits with them. I think one of his first albums that was a hit was The Point, which was actually the music for a animated film. Originally, I think the original one, there have been a couple of narrators of the film over the years. One was Dustin Hoffman, another one was Ringo Starr. It's a classic animated film, and Harry did the music. And the album is essentially him telling the story with little songs that he wrote in between. Think About Your Troubles has been covered. Me and My Arrow was a top 40 single off of this album. And I think this record did pretty well too. I think it sold. It was, he was starting to gain reputation and was starting to sell records pretty well. Then the next record that came out is an interesting one, Aerial Pandemonium Ballet, which was one of the first remix albums, meaning he went back through and redid certain tracks from his previous albums. I think most of these are from his first 2 albums. There's some interesting stuff on this, but this is kind of an interesting sort of, for 1970 to have something like that is sort of unusual, and shows his versatility that he did something like this early in his career. His next record, Nilsson Schmilsson, was nominated for Album of the Year and had 4 singles off of it. I think all of them were top 40 singles. Without You, Coconut, Jump Into the Fire, and Gotta Get Up were all singles. So Gotta Get Up was just recently in Russian Doll, the Natasha Lyonne show on Netflix. Without You went to number 1. Coconut was a top 10 single and has been covered and referenced numerous times since. Jump Into the Fire was also a top 40, and I believe was in, I forget what show it was, not too long ago. That was background of some scene in something, I can't remember what it was. It's a great record, produced by the great Richard Perry, who produced all sorts of things, a lot of Ringo Starr's albums. It also has a lot of amazing musicians on it. It's got Jim Keltner, Ringo Starr, Klaus Vormann, Gary Wright, Jim Gordon, Jim Price. You know, you name the session musicians of the time period. George Harrison, I think, even plays on a song or two on this. They're on this and his couple of records he made around this time. His follow-up album, Son of Schmielsen, was a modest success and had a couple of big hits on of it. Remember, parentheses, Christmas, Spaceman are both, you hear those songs occasionally, were both top 40 singles. You're Breaking My Heart is a great one for, this one I think is a good example of Harry's sense of humor. You have things like Take 54, Joy, You're Breaking My Heart, I'd Rather Be Dead. I'd Rather Be Dead is sung with a senior citizen choir, and the first song and the sort of chorus line is I'd rather be dead than wet my bed, or various other things. You know, a bunch of other commentary on getting old. And there's a great video you can find on YouTube on his YouTube page of them recording it with the choir, and they got him a little drunk and got a bunch of elderly people singing all these horrible things about getting old. It's hysterical. And his last record of this period of his career, I'll explain why in a minute, was A Little Touch of Schmielsen in the Night, which is a standards album. He does a bunch of standards: Lazy Moon, For Me and My Gal, It Had to Be You, Making Whoopee, As Time Goes By. And they did a follow-up which had a couple of other songs. A Touch More, Schmielsen in the Night, I believe it was called. Has a beautiful, probably one of my favorite versions of Over the Rainbow for this as well. This was the last record Harry made before he lost his voice making his follow-up album, Pussycats, with John Lennon. Harry said he lost his voice during the making of the record, and not wanting to lose his opportunity of working with John, one of his heroes, he worked through it, which is probably the worst possible thing you can do. And his voice was never the same. You know, Harry had one of the most beautiful singing voices, amazing, I think like 6-octave vocal range, phenomenal singer. But said didn't want to lose his opportunity to work with John. And this was during this is 73, 74, I think. This was during John's so-called Lost Weekend period, when John was away from Yoko and was sort of getting into partying and being a bit of a ne'er-do-well. And all of their friends say that they were not very good influence on each other. There's some amazing songs on this record. He does a great cover of Many Rivers to Cross and things of that nature. But he also has some of his best songs: Don't Forget Me, All My Life, Black Sails are all on this record. There's some amazing material, but it's not the best sounding record in the world. Some of the bigger songs on it are very bombastic and kind of obnoxious. But again, it has everybody on it under the sun. Keith Moon even plays on this record. Ringo Starr, you name it, plays on this album. Harry, around this time, he got a little bit too much into the drink and the drugs and whatever, and got to party a little bit too much for his own good. And it shows on his next record, Do It on Monday. Again, this record has some amazing songs on it. Kojak Colombo, Salmon Falls, are all on this record. But it's him clearly not giving as much effort as he should to his songs and to the arrangements and stuff. It's a little ramshackle and a little, said, still some great stuff. Harry never failed to be a great writer, but he sometimes was a little self-sabotaging in his in taking care of making it sound as good as it should. He then made Sandman. By this point, his voice was starting to come back, and he had it was a little bit cleaner sounding. And again, there's a little bit more care for the arrangements and stuff on this record. The ivy-covered walls are on this, and Jesus Christ, You're Tall are on this record. Yeah, the next record is mostly covers. That's the Way It Is, which is a that is All, which is a George Harrison song he does on this record. He only writes like 2 songs on this record. I think he was getting kind of a little worn out, and I think he might have been going through writer's block or something of that nature, because he'd only writes a couple on this. He does. This is worthwhile, if nothing else, for the amazing cover of "Sail Away" from Randy Newman, which is his last cover he did of him on this record. To hear him finding his voice again on this record, really, but it's not. There's not as much on this one that's interesting. He then does his last proper record for RCA, called Nilsson, with K and the 2 N's, which was one of his few records that he wrote every song on the album. This album has some great songs on it. All I Think About Is You, Perfect Day, and there's a really funny little set piece called Whodunit, which is sort of a murder mystery thing. And it's set to music on here, which is kind of amusing, and is really a very good album. Around this was his 1977. This came out. At this point, Harry's contract with RCA ran out, and he kind of stopped doing as much. He got involved when John Lennon died. He got into a lot of causes, gun control, things of that nature. Got married, kind of became more of a family man. In 1980, he got an opportunity to score Popeye, the Robert Altman film. It's a famous sort of disaster piece around this film. Despite there being some excellent songs on this record. Got Robin Williams' first film that he did, and wrote everything with the great Van Dyke Parks. But he did this, where he said he wrote all the songs, he did like the score. And then his last proper album during his lifetime is Flash Harry, which was done. There's a couple of songs on this record. Old Dirt Road, which he wrote with John Lennon, which John had on his Walls and Bridges album, I believe, at the time. This record is not as focused. It's him not really sure what he's trying to go for or do. Unfortunately, this was Harry's last album during his lifetime. In 1994, this was 1981, he sort of went into a sort of bubble and sort of became more of a family man, tried to stay home and be a parent, and he didn't really, his partying ways from over the years sort of caught up with him, and he ended up dying in 1994. So he would have been 53, 52. I mean, he was, far too young. Kind of said because of his partying sort of caught up with him, and it's a very tragic shame. They just 2 years ago released his final recordings. He was working on an album when he died, with Mark Hudson, which they ended up releasing, called Lost and Found. This album is very good. Has some very, very good songs on it. Yeah, Harry was an amazing songwriter, one of the best, an amazing singer, and has a unique body of work that can't very few people have even close to. I will say, if you ever find this, this is his RCA collection on CD. This is an amazing box set. It has 3 discs of bonus material, of leftover tracks and standalone singles and things. You cannot go wrong with Harry Nilsson. I highly, highly recommend. Yeah, so thank you so much for watching. I hope to see you all again.